Resident Evil has produced some of the most disturbing creatures in gaming history. From parasitic nightmares that hijack your brain, to fungal infections that turn loving families into cannibals, the franchise has spent decades finding new ways to ruin your sleep. So today, I'm breaking down every one of Resident Evil's most terrifying monsters and everything that makes them tick. Starting with the one that literally started it all, Tyrant. Before there was Nemesis, before Mr. X was stomping through the Raccoon City Police Department in a trench coat, there was the T-002. And here's the thing. This single creature is the reason every Tyrant in the entire franchise exists. The T-002 was the first successful product of Umbrella's Tyrant Project, a top-secret initiative to create enhanced human bioweapons with superior intelligence. Not just strong, intelligent. The T-002 retained cognitive function almost at the same level as its pre-infected human form, meaning it could follow complex tactical commands far beyond what simpler bioweapons like Hunters were capable of. Umbrella had finally built a monster that could think, but here's where it gets complicated. In May 1998, interference from Queen Leech allowed the T-002 to release an airborne pathogen that infected multiple individuals at the Arklay laboratory. That single event spiraled completely out of control, eventually leading to the destruction of Raccoon City. Umbrella's greatest achievement became the catalyst for their greatest disaster, which is, not ideal. And the T-002 never even got to prove what it could do. Its life was cut short before full deployment, but its DNA template lived on. The T-103 mass-produced clones, including the infamous Mr. X, were all built from the T-002's blueprint. Every Tyrant that has ever chased you down a hallway owes its existence to this one prototype sitting in a tank beneath the Arklay Mountains. But if you think a thinking bioweapon is scary, wait until you hear about what happens when a zombie you already killed decides it's not done with you yet. Crimson Head. You know what's worse than a zombie? A zombie you already killed coming back faster, angrier and harder to put down because you were too cheap to burn it. Crimson Heads are what happens when you leave a zombie corpse lying around in the Spencer Mansion like dirty laundry. Standard zombies you've already downed undergo a secondary mutation if you don't dispose of the body. Their skin turns deep red, their speed skyrockets, and they're not shuffling anymore, they're sprinting. Here's where resource management becomes psychological warfare. You can prevent the transformation entirely. Destroy the head, take off a limb, or burn the corpse with fuel. Except fuel is precious. Every canister you pour on a dead zombie is one you can't use later, so you start making calculations. This hallway is out of the way. I probably won't come back here. Famous last words, because if you guess wrong, that zombie you left on the floor is now a Crimson Head, and it knows you're there the instant you walk in. Normal zombies only react when you get close. Crimson Heads lock onto you from across the entire area and close the distance fast. And then there's the Crimson Head prototype one, sealed in a coffin beneath the mansion cemetery. This thing has up to 5,600 HP depending on difficulty. For context, Chris Redfield has 1,400. A single reanimated zombie can absorb more punishment than the protagonists themselves, which is, not ideal. The genius of this system is that the game never punishes you for fighting. It punishes you for being sloppy afterward. Every zombie becomes a ticking time bomb you either defuse or forget about until it's too late. But if a zombie that comes back stronger sounds bad, wait until you meet what happens. When one keeps mutating and loses its skin entirely. Licker. Most creatures in Resident Evil are dangerous because of what they can do. Lickers are dangerous because of what they can't. They have 0 eyes, no skin. Their brains are completely exposed, sitting on top of their skulls like an invitation for anything sharp, and somehow that makes them worse. Here's the thing. Lickers started out as regular people. In the latter half of 1998, humans infected with an unnamed T-virus strain underwent one of the most radical physical transformations in the entire franchise. We're talking complete loss of skin, reformed bone and muscle structure, massive talons, and a barbed tongue that can extend 6 to 8 feet to pierce and decapitate prey. 6 to 8 feet. Oh, that's longer than most people are tall. But the real nightmare is the blindness. You'd think losing your eyes would make a creature less threatening. Turns out no. The complete loss of sight supercharges their hearing to an almost absurd degree. Any sound, any footstep, any reload triggers immediate lethal aggression. They don't need to see you, they just need to hear you breathe. And this is where the design gets genuinely clever. Every other enemy in Resident Evil up to that point operated on visual detection. You see them, they see you. bullets happen. Lickers threw that entire loop in the trash. Suddenly you're not watching corners for movement, you're thinking about how loud your character's boots are on tile. You're creeping through hallways wondering if opening a door is going to get your head removed by a tongue moving faster than you can aim. The game shifted from visual stealth to acoustic stealth, and most players didn't even realize it was happening until they were already dead, which is, not ideal. But if you think a blind, skinless predator with a 6-foot tongue is bad, wait until you meet the thing that can see you just fine, follows you everywhere, and absolutely cannot be killed. Mr. X. Most monsters in Resident Evil want to eat you. Mr. X wants to complete a mission objective, and you just happen to be standing in the way. The T-00, better known as Mr. X, was one of 6 T-103 tyrants airlifted into Raccoon City during the 1998 outbreak. 6, not 1. Umbrella dropped half a dozen of these things into a burning city like it was a routine delivery. The T-00 specifically had 2 jobs: recover a G-Virus sample hidden inside Sherry Birkin's pendant and kill every surviving officer and civilian inside the Raccoon City Police Department. Not contain, not subdue, man, kill. Here's what makes the T-103 line so terrifying. These weren't mindless creatures stumbling through hallways. They possessed near-human intelligence and could function as bodyguards, assassins, retrieval agents, and frontline soldiers against armed opposition. Mr. X wasn't a monster wandering aimlessly. He was an operative executing orders with the focus of a trained killer who just happens to be 8 feet tall and functionally immortal, and that's the part that breaks your brain. During the B scenario of Resident Evil 2, you cannot permanently kill him. Every bullet you pump into his body buys you maybe 30 seconds of silence before those footsteps start again. That sound, the steady thud of boots on tile echoing through the police station, became one of the most psychologically oppressive elements in survival horror history. You're not fighting him, you're surviving him. Even his trench coat had a purpose. It wasn't a fashion choice. The coat allowed T-103 models to blend into human populations until deployment, meaning Umbrella designed these things to walk among civilians undetected, which is, not ideal. Mr. X essentially invented the stalker horror archetype within Resident Evil, the idea that something is always coming, always tracking, always just around the corner. He was the prototype, but if you think an unkillable man in a trench coat is bad, wait until you meet the thing Umbrella built to be even worse: Nemesis. Most monsters in Resident Evil have a ceiling. You figure out the pattern, you exploit the weakness, you win. Nemesis doesn't work like that. Nemesis gets worse the more you fight it. Umbrella Europe's number 6 laboratory created the Nemesis T-type by implanting NE alpha parasites into T-103 tyrant hosts. The result was a creature with intelligence and raw power that made standard tyrants look like science fair projects. But the parasite itself is where things get truly disturbing. The NE alpha resembles an enlarged human brain, and it controls its host by threading a tentacle upward through the skull, destroying the forebrain entirely and hacking directly into the brain's architecture. While it's in there, it secretes chemicals that supercharge the T-virus already present in the host, granting regeneration so extreme that conventional damage becomes essentially meaningless. Here's where it gets complicated. When Jill Valentine managed to severely injure Nemesis during the Raccoon City incident, most creatures would slow down. Nemesis disengaged its power limiter. It literally allowed the parasite to operate at full capacity, accelerating mutation in real time. Heavy tentacles replaced its arms, which meant it couldn't use firearms anymore. But those tentacles became even deadlier weapons than any gun, capable of whipping through targets and piercing flesh like it was nothing, and it doesn't stop at killing. The parasite can implant offspring into other hosts using those same tentacles, infecting victims with a supercharged Doppy-virus strain. Nemesis doesn't just eliminate targets, it recruits them. Every person it touches is a potential new parasitic host. The fundamental horror of Nemesis isn't its strength or its speed, it's the feedback loop. You heard it, it adapts. You adapt. It evolves past your adaptation. At a certain point, the parasite and the tyrant host become completely indistinguishable. One organism built entirely around the concept of never ever stopping, which is, not ideal when you're a single woman with a handgun in a city full of zombies. But if Nemesis represents what happens when science pushes parasitic symbiosis too far, the next entry shows what happens when science pushes a single human being past every conceivable limit for decades. Dalmas Lisa Trevor. Every creature on this list is terrifying because of what it can do to you. Lisa Trevor is terrifying because of what was done to her. Born around 1953, Lisa was just a kid when Umbrella got their hands on her, and what they discovered changed everything. Lisa Trevor became the first known progenitor adapter since the Neolithic era. That means her body could survive exposure to viral strains that would flat out kill any other human being on the planet. Every other test subject died Lisa just kept mutating and kept surviving. So naturally, Umbrella did what any morally bankrupt megacorporation would do. They made her a permanent test subject. For decades, Lisa was exposed to virus after virus after virus at the Arklay laboratory. Not to cure her, not to help her, just to see what would happen. She was a living petri dish, a child turned into a biological notebook for scientists who stopped seeing her as human, somewhere around experiment number 3. By the time they were done with her, she was barely recognizable as a person. Decades of continuous mutation had stripped away almost everything. Almost. Because here's the part that genuinely hurts. Despite everything they did to her, despite decades of experimentation that turned her into something the game classifies as a monster, Lisa Trevor retained enough consciousness, enough emotional capacity, enough humanity to recognize her own mother's corpse, and her last word before throwing herself down a chasm was, that's it! That was her one act of genuine agency across her entire existence as a laboratory specimen. Not an attack, not an escape, a choice to stop suffering. Umbrella's greatest bioweapon success was achieved by destroying a child's entire life. And the most human moment any creature in this franchise has ever had belongs to the one they tried hardest to make inhuman. But if Lisa's story made you feel something, the next entry is going to make you feel nothing but panic. Because chainsaws don't really leave room for sympathy. Dr. Salvador. Nobody knows who this guy actually is, and that's what makes him terrifying. Dr. Salvador is a Las Plagas infected human standing roughly 6 feet 5 inches tall, wielding a chainsaw that can decapitate Leon Kennedy in a single swing. He has 3,000 HP on standard difficulty and 4,000 on professional, making him one of the tankiest human enemies in Resident Evil 4. But here's the thing, for a character this iconic, we know almost nothing about him. The name itself is a clue wrapped in irony. Doctor in Spanish refers specifically to medical professionals and surgeons. Salvador translates to the Savior, or the Messiah, so his full title essentially means the Savior Doctor, a celebratory designation suggesting he was once a respected surgeon held in high regard by Ramon Salazar, a healer, someone the village trusted with their lives. Now he carries a chainsaw. Let that sink in for a second. A man whose hands once held a scalpel, whose entire identity revolved around saving people, now sprints at you with a 2-stroke engine and a spinning chain of teeth. The inversion is almost poetic if it weren't so horrifying. Whatever the Plagas did to this man, it didn't just change his body, it completely rewrote his purpose, and the lore gives us basically nothing else to work with. The bottle cap from the shooting gallery minigame provides a scrap of information, but beyond that, his pre-infection identity appears entirely consumed by his parasitic role. There's no journal entry, no tragic backstory hidden in a file cabinet. Evidence suggests Salazar granted him dominance within the village hierarchy, potentially rewarding his medical service with the power of infinite life through Plagas infection, a gift that turned a doctor into a butcher. The scariest part isn't the chainsaw, it's that we'll never know what he was like before. His humanity didn't just die, it was erased. But if you think a man with no eyes for anything but violence is unsettling, wait until you meet a creature that literally had its eyes sewn shut. Garrador. The Garrador might be the most pitiful thing in the entire Resident Evil franchise, and that's saying something for a series where a little girl was experimented on for 30 years straight. The name translates to the Clawer in Spanish, which is about as on the nose as it gets. These were once ordinary humans, enhanced through Plagas parasites to become something far worse. The parasites granted them exceptional musculature, increased bone density, and razor-sharp claws on both arms, capable of tearing through flesh and steel alike. On paper, the perfect weapon. Here's the thing though, they worked too well. The enhancement made them so uncontrollably aggressive that they attacked anything in sight. Allies, handlers, furniture, walls. Didn't matter. If it existed near a Garrador, it was getting shredded. So their creators, in their infinite wisdom, decided the best solution wasn't to scale back the experiment or, stop making murder machines. No, they sewed the creature's eyelids shut, literally stitched their eyes closed and threw them in cells, which is, not ideal. But here's where it gets worse. Just like the Lickers, removing their sight didn't make them less dangerous. It made them different dangerous. Their hearing sharpened to lethal levels, allowing them to track targets entirely through sound. Drop a pin in a stone corridor, and a Garrador will pinpoint your location and charge with enough force to impale you against a wall. Every echoing footstep in those confined castle spaces becomes a death sentence. Think about what that existence actually looks like. Permanently blind. imprisoned in darkness between fights. No understanding of why, just rage and sound and claws and nothing else. They can't see their captors, they can't see their victims. They exist in perpetual torment, desperate to destroy anything that makes noise, chained up until someone decides to let them loose on an intruder. Their creators built something too dangerous to control, then mutilated it further to compensate for their own failure. And somehow, the Garrador is the one locked in a cage. But if you think a blinded, claw-handed prisoner is unsettling, wait until you meet something that literally cannot die no matter how many times you shoot it. Regenerador. There's a moment in Resident Evil 4 where the game stops being an action horror and becomes something else entirely. You walk into a lab, the lighting changes, the music drops out, and then you hear it. This wet, raspy breathing coming from somewhere down the hall. That's the Regenerador. And it is, without exaggeration, one of the most fundamentally wrong things Capcom has ever put on screen. Here's how they're made. Los Illuminados took human subjects and implanted not one, but multiple Plagas parasites into a single body. The result is a creature that barely qualifies as human anymore. The proportions are off. The skin is stretched and gray. The limbs move in ways that make your brain reject what it's seeing. It walks toward you with this slow, shuffling gait, arms swaying like they're not fully attached, and the whole time, it's breathing. Just breathing. But the real nightmare is what happens when you shoot one. You unload a full magazine into its torso and the thing stumbles, maybe loses an arm. Then the arm grows back. You blow off a leg and it drags itself toward you, while the leg regenerates in real time. Every parasite inside the body independently works to repair damaged tissue, meaning conventional weapons are completely useless. You're not fighting a creature, you're fighting a biological process. The only way to actually kill a Regenerador is with a thermal scope attached to a rifle, which reveals the parasites glowing inside the body like hotspots on an X-ray. You have to target and destroy each one individually. Miss even a single parasite and the thing keeps coming. It's brilliant game design disguised as a panic attack. But here's where it gets genuinely disturbing. Think about what infinite regeneration actually means for the thing experiencing it. A Regenerador cannot die through damage. Every wound heals. Every destroyed organ rebuilds. It exists in a state of infinite suffering and infinite recovery. A body that will never stop hurting and never stop fixing itself. It didn't ask for this. Nobody in that lab volunteered. And now it just walks hallways, breathing, forever. Which is, not ideal. But at least the Regenerador is slow. Its spiked variant lurking deeper in those island labs. That one's fast. Verdugo. Most creatures in Resident Evil are scary because they're powerful. The Verdugo is scary because it's patient. Created by Los Illuminados through a fusion of human and insect DNA under complete Plagas control, the two Verdugos served as Ramon Salazar's personal bodyguards. One wore red, the other black. They stood silently at his side, draped in resplendent Los Illuminados cloaks, looking like nothing more than loyal attendants. Here's the thing though, the red one used to be Salazar's butler. The black one used to be his housemaid. Let that sink in for a second. This man weaponized his own household staff. Beneath those cloaks, both Verdugos had been transformed into insectoid nightmares with a carapace harder than steel. But they didn't act like insects. They retained full human-level intelligence and tactical planning ability, which is exactly what makes them so much worse than a brute force creature. A Verdugo doesn't charge you, it stalks you, it watches. It waits until you're wounded, cornered, and running low on options before it even reveals its true form. That's not instinct, that's strategy. And the worst part, none of it is their choice. Despite appearing to possess genuine agency, despite the calculated hunting behavior and the deliberate decision-making, every single action is dictated by the Plagas parasite inside them. They look like they're thinking. They look like they're choosing, but they're puppets wearing the skin of the people they used to be, carrying out orders for the man who turned them into monsters in the first place. There's something uniquely horrible about a creature that's smart enough to plan an ambush, but has zero say in whether it wants to. The butler who once served Salazar dinner now serves as his executioner, and he doesn't even get the dignity of knowing that's what he's become. Huff. But if identity horror makes you uncomfortable, wait until you meet something that doesn't bother with identity at all. Just a giant axe and absolutely zero interest in conversation. Executioner Majini. Most creatures in Resident Evil come out of a lab. Some scientist mixed the wrong chemicals. Something escaped containment, and now there's a monster loose. The executioner Majini didn't come from any lab. It came from a cult. This thing was a human being, a person who joined the instigator Majini's nationalist rebellion in Kijuju. That rebellion saw the deaths of hundreds of perceived foreigners and so-called race traitors. And somewhere in the middle of all that ideological violence, this individual got pumped full of type 2 plaga and became something far worse than a foot soldier. It became a walking execution platform. The weapon alone tells you everything. A massive flaming axe swung with enough force to flatten anything in its path. The creature demonstrates multiple attack patterns, including devastating double swings it throws out as retaliation after you land a combo, which is, you know, not ideal. Hey, nice hits. Here's 2 axe swings to the face as a thank you, but the grab attack is where things get genuinely cruel. If this thing gets its hands on you, it lifts you into the air and triggers a quick time event. Fail to shake free, and it throws you to the ground for a second QTE. Fail that one? Instant death. No second chances. Just dead. Here's where it gets complicated though. The executioner doesn't go down easy. Even when you've poured round after round into this thing, it keeps coming. No stagger animation that gives you breathing room. It just absorbs punishment and closes the distance. Every second you spend reloading is a second it spends getting closer with that axe. That detail is what makes the executioner Majini arguably the franchise's most politically charged creature. This isn't a bioweapon built to spec. This is radicalization made flesh. A human being elevated to monstrous power through cult manipulation and parasitic enhancement, retaining possibly more of its original personality than any lab creation ever could. And that personality chose violence long before the Plaga finished the job. But if the executioner Majini shows what happens when ideology meets infection, wait until you see what happens when a loving mother meets a fungal bioweapon. Marguerite Baker. Most Resident Evil monsters are scary because of what they look like. Marguerite Baker is scary because of what she used to be. Before the infection, Marguerite was exactly what you'd expect from a rural Louisiana mother. She cooked meals, kept the house running, welcomed guests. She was, by every account, a normal woman living a normal life. And then a psychoactive fungal bioweapon rewired her brain, and everything about her stayed almost the same. That's the part that gets under your skin. See, the fungus didn't erase Marguerite, it hijacked her. The infection colonized her neural tissue, inducing extreme violent tendencies and granting her superhuman durability, the ability to regenerate from wounds that should have killed her 10 times over. But here's where it gets genuinely disturbing. It kept enough of her original personality intact to create this horrible hybrid. She still acts like a mother. She still fusses over meals. She still talks to you like you're a guest in her home. She just expresses all of that through torture and biological experimentation on people she's kidnapped and dragged into her basement. Her maternal instincts didn't disappear, they mutated. Marguerite worked alongside her husband Jack and her son Lucas, all of them under the psychic control of Eveline, a bioweapon in the form of a little girl who the family was compelled to treat as their own. An entire family operation running out of a house that looks like it belongs on a real estate listing, not a crime scene. Their actual daughter Zoe was the only one who managed to resist. That's what makes Marguerite so effective as a horror concept. This isn't a lab. This isn't a castle. This is a kitchen, a living room, a family dinner table where something is deeply, fundamentally wrong with the food and the woman serving it. She represents the corruption of everything a home is supposed to be. Safety, warmth, a mother's care, all twisted into instruments of suffering. You're not fighting a monster in a facility. You're fighting a monster in a house that smells like it used to have fresh cornbread cooling on the counter. But if Marguerite is the infection of motherhood, her husband Jack is the infection of fatherhood. And somehow, his version is even worse. Jack Baker. Most of the creatures on this list were built to be monsters. Engineered in labs, grown in tubes, designed to kill. Jack Baker was a dad from Louisiana who made the mistake of being a good person. Before the infection, Jack was a normal, compassionate family man living in Dolby Parish. Then he found a young girl named Eveline, shipwrecked and alone, alongside a woman named Mia. He did what any decent person would do, brought them into his home, fed them, tried to help. That act of kindness destroyed everything. Eveline wasn't a lost child. She was a psychoactive fungal bioweapon developed by the Connections. The moment Jack brought her inside, the infection spread through his entire family. The fungus colonized their neural tissue, hijacking their brains while leaving just enough of their original personalities intact to make the whole thing infinitely worse. From 2014 to 2017, Jack kidnapped, murdered, and ate over 100 people. The infection granted him regenerative capabilities that bordered on absurd. Severed limbs grew back, wounds closed in seconds. You could put enough bullets into this man to fill a bathtub and he'd just keep coming. Which is, not ideal, but here's where it gets devastating. Jack experiences moments of clarity, brief windows where his actual consciousness overwhelms the infection, and he realizes exactly what he's become. During these moments, he doesn't attack, he doesn't rage, he apologizes, he recognizes the horror of what his body has done, and he begs the protagonist to free his family. Think about that. Over 100 murders, committed by a man who is occasionally awake inside his own body, watching it happen, unable to stop it. A man whose only crime was rescuing someone who needed help. Jack Baker is the emotional mirror of Lisa Trevor. Both were good people, annihilated by forces they never asked for. But Jack might be worse, because Lisa's consciousness eroded over decades. Jack gets to wake up, he gets to remember, and then the fungus pulls him back under. But if Jack Baker represents tragedy, you can at least comprehend. The next entry is something your brain genuinely cannot process. Baby. Every single monster on this list can be fought. You can shoot them, stab them, hit them with a rocket launcher if you're feeling dramatic. The baby is the exception. You get 0 weapons, 0 items, 0 ways to fight back. You're stuck in a pitch black basement with a thing that wants to eat you, and your only option is to run and hide like a child during a thunderstorm. Here's the setup. Ethan Winters enters House Beneviento, and Lady Beneviento's infected plants start pumping hallucinogenic compounds into the air. From that point forward, nothing Ethan sees can be trusted, which means the baby, this massive, deformed, fetal creature hunting you through the basement, might not even be real. The game never confirms either way. And honestly, that's worse, because if it's real, at least you understand the rules. If it's not real, then your own mind is trying to kill you, and there's nothing scarier than that. The creature itself is a warped version of Ethan's daughter, Rosemary. It can't walk. Its arms and legs are underdeveloped, so it drags itself forward in this horrible grasshopper-like shape, pulling its body along the ground and leaving bloody streaks behind it. Its eyes barely function, and it only appears in total darkness. But its head can open wide enough to swallow a full-grown adult whole. If it catches you, that's it. Instant death. No quick-time event. Just gone. But the detail that broke people was the voice. This thing can talk. Not full sentences. Just 3 words. Mama, Dada, Yummy. A giant fetal monster dragging itself through a blood-streaked basement saying, Dada, while trying to swallow you whole. I don't know what to tell you. The baby appears at exactly 3 scripted points during the basement escape, and between each one, the thing just vanishes. No body, no evidence, no confirmation it was ever there at all. The game is deliberately messing with your head, and it knows exactly what it's doing. A confirmed monster can be understood. A hallucination that can kill you cannot. You're not just scared of the baby, you're scared of whether your own perception can be trusted. That's not survival horror, that's psychological warfare. But if you think a nightmare baby is the peak of Village's horror, wait until you meet the 9'6" aristocrat who's been drinking blood since the 1950s. Lady Dimitrescu. The internet turned this woman into a meme, a thirst trap, a 6'something goth girlfriend fantasy that broke Twitter for a solid week in 2021. And look, fair enough, but the actual lore behind Lady Dimitrescu is so much darker than her cultural reputation suggests that it's almost funny how hard everyone missed the point. Countess Alcina Dimitrescu maintained pseudo-feudal rule over the peasantry near Castle Dimitrescu from the 1950s until her death in February 2021. That's over 60 years of unchallenged aristocratic authority. The locals feared her for decades over allegations of mass murder and cannibalism, and here's the thing. Every single allegation turned out to be completely true. Standing just under 9 feet 6 inches tall, her impossible height wasn't some random mutation. She inherited a blood disease from an ancestor, one with symptoms eerily similar to the progenitor virus. On top of that, she survived infection with the Cadou parasite, which should have killed her, but instead granted regenerative capabilities. The combination of both conditions created something that shouldn't exist, a nearly 10-foot tall cannibal countess with a healing factor, running an entire feudal society for 6 decades, which is, not ideal. She served as one of the 4 lords under Mother Miranda, maintaining genuine political authority the entire time. Her 3 daughters, Bella, Cassandra, and Daniela, weren't biological offspring. They were women she adopted and transformed through parasitic infection into loyal extensions of her household. And her established cannibalism wasn't some hidden secret. It was accepted practice within her domain. The people living under her rule knew what she was and simply lived with it, suggesting a complete moral inversion of every social structure she controlled. That's what makes her genuinely terrifying. Not the height, not the claws. The fact that she built and maintained a functioning society where human consumption was just how things worked for 60 years. Nobody overthrew her. Nobody fled. They just accepted that this was the deal. The internet gave her a fan club. The lore gave her a body count spanning generations. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.